let's go ahead and get started. For those of you that haven't met me, my name is Kara Welke. I'm an occupational therapist, owner of Next Level Occupational Therapy and Home Therapy Solutions. Met Kevin almost a year ago when we started doing FCEs in our practice. One of our therapists that is in our Therapy Business Builder program ended up she was going to start a mobile practice and ended up coming into the option to be able to do FCEs for attorneys, and kind of took a little pivot. And that's how I ended up meeting Kevin, because she utilized Kevin when she was getting up and going with the FCEs. So we do FCEs in our practice, and then we've been working with Kevin since last April. We did a training with a good group of therapists that own their own businesses on adding FCEs to their practice. Kevin came to our Next Level Live training in Boston. Hopefully we can talk him into coming to our next live event that we'll be hosting. So he has a lot of great information, and he is bringing along Chris. I was able to meet Chris this last week, I think it was, as well. So I'm going to let Kevin and Chris take everything over on how you guys can make money doing FCEs, and you guys will learn who refers, how to bill, and what to charge. And I will tell you guys, just from my own personal experience, before they get in, we have therapists that are contracting with attorneys. We do FCEs for our workman's comp. One of our FCEs, our reimbursement was about $2,300 for 6 hours. With the attorneys, we're seeing between $700 to $1,000 as far as what they contract with attorneys. So those are a few options, but Kevin and Chris are way more experts than I am, and we'll go into all the details. So make sure you guys ask questions throughout as well. So Kevin, I'll let you take over.
All right, thank you so much. I'll let you get to helping your husband. Um, I'll do a quick introduction of myself, and then we'll let Chris introduce himself. So my name is Kevin Cairns. I've been on a few of these webinars, so I'm glad to be back again. In the past, last time we sort of went through some of the background stuff and about FCEs and when they're done, and a lot of the questions that were coming to us last time were all about billing codes and how to bill and how to build my business. So I couldn't think of anyone better than my friend Chris to bring along on this time. I've been with Metrics. I started Metrics in 2006. We do functional capacity and software training and tools. And Chris and I met back in 2014, and I worked with him and helped put an FCE system within the company that he was working with, and we've been working together for the past 10 years, and he has vast experience in developing business and understanding how FCEs can be done and where they can be done. And so maybe I'll give me a segue to let Chris just do a little background on where he is, and then I'll ask some questions towards Chris that'll kind of direct our conversation. I will, as we're going through, I'll scan the chat as much as possible so Chris can talk, and I can pop your questions into him. So Chris, can you just tell us a little bit more about your background?
Sure. Thanks, Kevin. I'm a physical therapist. I've been practicing since 2010 and working in sort of the occupational health and workers' compensation space pretty much exclusively since 2014 when Kevin and I met, and have done sort of anything and everything. So whether it be actually performing FCEs and understanding sort of the nuances of the testing process, how to bill, whether it be through the networks of the world, like the One Calls or the Med Risks. Those are kind of the large players in a lot of states, or establishing relationship and networking with nurse case managers, attorneys. I've worked with our sales team to grow our footprint in different markets, and so I have sort of the clinical, I have sort of the administrative and ops side, and I certainly have the sales side. So I think again, I appreciate Kevin inviting me because I think that I can add hopefully a useful lens, from a variety of perspectives on any sort of FCE questions.
Great. So I'll sort of preface where we came to this part of the conversation anyway relates a lot to what happens in my daily kind of life where I got people to say, I've had a few people ask me to do FCEs, but I've always said no. Maybe you've done some training, you've got some tools, but you really kind of want to understand, where do these FCEs come from? Who's going to pay me for them? What do they actually want to know? And so what we're going to do with Chris is get him to walk us through all of those things. When we met with Kara last week, we decided on a couple of pathways that we would talk about. So we're going to start with a lens of the solopreneur, if you will, or solo practitioner, as track number one, and then track number two, we'll talk more about if you're working in a clinic based piece that way. So I'll bring up this next side. Chris, we don't have to go into great detail, but maybe you just want to say a couple words about each one of these referral sources, and then we can do sort of a deeper dive. This will just sort of set the table so people kind of know where we're going.
Sure. Yeah, so lawyers often, and again, one of the challenges with talking about FCEs and how to, maximize the potential referral volume that you'll receive is contingent upon the state laws. And so there are some states where you're going to have heavy lawyer involvement, and we can get into, again, some of the details around those in a few slides. And so, lawyers, if they're trying to argue around someone's functional limitations, what kind of disability benefits they may be eligible for, what kind of permanent impairment they have, and how that relates to dollar amounts. Lawyers will often refer for functional testing, which is what a functional capacity evaluation is. Employers, if someone's had an injury on the job, perhaps they've been off work, perhaps they haven't been able to do their job. An employer might ask, as a claim is ending or approaching its end, for an FCE to be performed to determine if that individual is ready to return to work at full duty, or if certain accommodations might be made. Networks, again, those are the one calls and the med risks, and there are a lot of regional players. And again, considering how there's pretty solid attendance tonight from all over the country, I'll spare you getting into any of the local players, but those networks are often leveraged by the insurance companies to sort of be the easy button for them. So, they don't want to have to coordinate transportation. They don't want to have to coordinate physical or occupational therapy. And so, the networks are sort of a one-stop shop. And so they will often sort of serve as a middleman, and FCEs are something that they'll refer out to PTs or OTs for. Physicians, this is often, as we, again, begin to talk in more depth in a few slides, physicians are often sort of the easy button for people getting started, and it's just because they can refer directly to you. And we'll talk about ways that maybe you can stand out to a physician, because so often there's a lot of therapists who are marketing their skill sets, and being able to offer a functional capacity evaluation is a huge way to delineate yourself sort of from the crowd. And then finally, disability insurers. Kara and Kevin and I spoke last week. And, this disability insurer group, they often pay a premium. They often struggle with finding people willing to do them. And so they try to incentivize therapists. We often see this like in the lymphedema space. I know somebody mentioned that, these are things that functional capacity evaluations are often viewed through the lens of a workers' compensation or like on-the-job injury. But there are those folks that simply can't work due to various medical conditions. They may have long-term disability policies. and those insurance companies will routinely want to circle back to make sure that that individual who's drawing benefits is still disabled and unable to work. And so they'll often order a functional capacity evaluation. So lots of opportunity, and as I mentioned, and we'll get into further, in your state, you may have access to all these, and in others, you might be limited just because of the rules and regulations within the state.
Great. All right. So I guess what we'll do here then is kind of think about what the solo person, like, I think the way that you and I framed the question the other day worked pretty well was like, what would Chris do? Like if you were
Yeah,
going to be starting your business, or building a business, like kind of where you were, and so that's kind of how I put these kind of things together. And I'll put up this screen because I think that's where you had mentioned that you would start was with the network. So you could go into
sure.
detail around that idea.
Sure. And so, as somebody practicing in a state like Tennessee, that's where I spent. I've now recently relocated to Wisconsin, which is a whole, again, all the things that I learned that were highly applicable to Tennessee now have limited applicability in this state. But with my exposure and experience in Tennessee, working with the networks is a huge opportunity. Simply because, as I mentioned, the workers' compensation system is pretty layered. And so, an employer, let's say in Tennessee, might have an employee who gets injured, and they might have a workers' compensation insurance policy, but that adjuster that oversees that policy might be based out of Montana. And so that adjuster doesn't want to have to pull up Google and search for good physical therapy providers in Tennessee, which is where the injured worker lives. And so a lot of, if your state allows networks to get involved, you'll see insurance adjusters leverage those networks. And the reason is that network can coordinate imaging, they can coordinate transportation, they can coordinate physical therapy services, they can coordinate work conditioning, they can coordinate FCEs. And so, working with the networks is often perhaps not the best place to start if you're a sole provider who's traveling a lot, simply because they're going to rely on a variety of different metrics to consider who they're referring their FCEs to. That said, if you're in a state that's a little bit more rural, and there is a lack of opportunity, and if networks are allowed in your state, this is a great opportunity because it's very passive. Once you establish yourself within their network, they're just going to want to find injured workers who are close to where you're at. And if you're willing to travel, that could be an opportunity for you. Because you could be close to that injured worker. And so that could provide you with an opportunity to perform that functional capacity evaluation. Candidly, the easy button is nice because they can send you some sort of passive referral volume. The reimbursement's probably not going to be as good as some other referral avenues. And so this can be an okay opportunity for a sole provider, but there are probably better opportunities to get some repetitions if you're, a mobile therapist or have your own individual practice.
And Chris, can you just what is where would you start, or what, if you're like, why don't we talk about Wisconsin, I guess, like if you're
Sure.
in Wisconsin,
Yeah.
like how would you start to get yourself involved with the networks that deal with your state then?
Yeah, it's going to be oftentimes picking up the phone and looking to connect with a provider relations person at the company. So again, a lot of these large networks are going to have credentialing processes that are going to look into, are you licensed in the state? When it comes to doing functional capacity evaluations, they're going to want to see an example of your product so they can ensure that the quality is there. They're going to want assurances that you're going to get them the report in a timely fashion. Most networks are going to want a finalized FCE report within 48 hours of the test being performed, and then they're going to want to get into talking pricing. And so that's where FCEs are can be very time consuming. And the networks, let's just say that their quality control is perhaps it's a lower bar than working with the physician directly or a nurse case manager directly. And so they often are going to prioritize what you're charging them and proximity. And so again, if you're going to look to sort of get into the network and be a therapist that they can leverage, if you as a single provider who's looking to drive volume, you're probably going to have to consider enticing them with a rate that may be less than you might want to take as a sole provider. So again, I think if we're talking about path number one, which is a solo practitioner trying to look at FCE volume, working with a network probably is not what you should be looking at first. And so again, if you wanted to do it, pick up the phone, look for those networks that operate within your space. You could, again, find other ways to determine what regional players might be at play by attending workers' compensation association meetings. There's national conferences. You could begin to network. But when it comes to, again, a solo provider, there's going to be a lot of work for perhaps not a ton of volume, and they're probably not going to reimburse as well as you might like.
And Chris,
if you're going to go the path that is working with a network, go at scale. Yeah.
How would you know what price to negotiate with a network? How would you determine that?
Right. So every state's going to have a fee schedule, and this is going to be public knowledge. And that the CPT code, which is listed on the slide there, is 97750, is the CPT code that's used in most states for billing for a functional capacity evaluation. Most FCEs are going to be between 12 and 16 units, so that's 3 to 4 hours. And every state, again, is going to oftentimes say, well, we're going to give you, 130% of Medicare, and Medicare is going to set a rate. And so you can get a rough idea of what full price might be based on the fee schedule. And then just understand that how a network makes money is by billing the insurance company the full fee schedule and then finding someone to do it for less, and they're going to keep what's in between. And so every state's a little different, Kevin, and that's where, again, it gets a little tricky when you're talking to folks from Michigan and Illinois and Texas and Washington, because there's going to be different fee schedules in each of those states. But I would start with your Bureau of Workers' Compensation. There's a lot of different government institutions that will publish that and make that available.
And Chris, is there like a rule of thumb that you experienced out there? If they're charging full rate, are you taking 70% a reasonable, 50%? Do you have like just I'm using percentages because of course you were saying
sure
themselves are a little bit different.
Yeah. I think 75 to 85% of fee schedule would be a good starting point. And again, I think what you'll find is, they're going to play their cards very close to the chest. And so if you, let's say, they're often going to want to deal early on in single case agreements. And that's going to be a scenario where, hey, we may not want to draft a whole contract because you're a single provider. But if we have something that comes up, and again, if it's in a more rural area, we have nobody else who can do it, and we know that you're in our network, we may reach out and say, hey, would you do it for this amount of money? Let's say you agree to it, and let's say all of a sudden you start getting a lot of volume from them, or you're seeing more than you might expect. It's probably because you're priced too low. And so they're going to want to, and conversely, if you give them a number and you don't see a lot of volume after, you might be priced too high. And they're not going to tell you what your competition is charging. And again, that sort of veil of secrecy is by design. They want to sort of, hope that they can get a better rate out of you by enticing you to sort of cut what you'll reimburse at or be reimbursed at.
Okay, excellent.
Kevin, I put in an example for North Dakota, just to kind of go off of what Chris is saying, is things do vary by state. So for North Dakota, we don't bill 97750. We actually bill WO 540. And again, they don't tell you, they don't necessarily have a fee schedule for FCEs. I can't remember the exact terminology, but basically we set what our prices that we're charging, and if they agree with it, they'll pay it, and that's what we set, and that's what they paid for it. So, and again, in North Dakota, we have a state-run workman's comp, so that can be different in other states as well.
And Kara, is that the one that you said you got paid the 2,300 for?
Yep. And that was 6 hours, so.
Okay, excellent. I don't see any other questions in there, Kara. Do you want to move on to the next slide, Chris, or you think we're good with that? Yeah, okay, cool.
I think there'll probably be a better opportunity to sort of build as a sole practitioner with some of the other
Sure.
referral opportunities.
So the next one I put up here was the employer municipalities.
Yeah, so this is often the best way to establish consistent volume and be reimbursed well. Again, it depends on your state. Like, again, I was doing, Kara, when we spoke, and you'd mentioned a lot of folks in your organization might be in North Dakota or Minnesota. I know as I was doing a little bit of just research for this, like in North Dakota, for example, employers have the opportunity to designate what they call DMP, or a designated medical provider. And so if you have a work comp or an injury at work and you tell your employer can basically have a list of who that individual sees first. And so, this is often useful for, physicians to get sort of referral volume. But if that employer has you listed as a physical therapy contact, the employer in many instances, particularly if they're larger employers, might be self-insured, and they're going to have some direction or ability to direct where referral volume is sent. Municipalities are great as well, because even in your smaller communities, municipal jobs, just whether it be you're in sanitation or parks and rec or your teachers, there's a lot of folks that can have injuries in those types of jobs. And often those communities want to support local business. And so, often a great place to sort of, start networking and trying to build referral volume would be like your chamber of commerce. Who out there is an employer who's having injuries, and what are you doing with those injured workers when it comes to their therapy needs? And so you can build relationships. And then again, these folks are going to have the same FCE needs, which is, hey, the individual had an injury. They're trying to get back to work. We need to establish what they can and maybe shouldn't do. And an FCE is the most objective way for us to quantify that. So if I was, again, a sole provider looking to drive FCE volume, I would be, again, going to some of those local, Chamber of Commerce. I'd be looking, again, I was looking specifically for Minnesota or like North Dakota as examples, but at Chamber of Commerce or economic development organizations. I know in North Dakota, there's a safety council annual conference. A lot of states have self-insured associations. And a lot of those municipalities or large employers want to keep things in-house. And so, starting to network there, figure out, what local industry exists, what kind of factories are available, and it's just starting to, search out those organizations and those individuals that can list you as, their provider of choice.
And Chris, is that really like once you've identified a municipality or an employer, is that the sort of the first thing that you'd be trying to do is be getting onto that list as so that if they needed an FCE, that you would be chosen for that particular service, and or I guess any other services that you might provide?
Yeah, and often with working with a municipality or an employer, they do want one-stop shopping for these types of, or for injuries. And so, it would be advisable if you wanted to see more FCE volume that perhaps you consider treating those workers' compensation injuries, that you consider offering work conditioning as an additional avenue. Because the more that you can be their go-to person for their injured worker, the better. And so, I think once you've established who's out there, making sure that you can, you need to be the expert. And so they need to know that when they have a need, that you can schedule someone quickly. They have to know that the product is going to be defensible and, a valid test. And that they're going to, if they have questions, be able to reach you. And that's where I think, again, as a individual in this example, as a sole provider running my own business, one of the things that I can do really well is offer customer service. And that's what you will find sets you apart when dealing with municipalities and local, hopefully moderate-sized employers, is that you can be that easy button for them, someone that they can build a relationship with, and you'll benefit because you'll start to see some hopefully referral, not just with FCEs, but also with work conditioning, with workers' compensation injuries. It needs to be, hopefully that you can cover all of their needs.
How does the billing? Can you talk a little bit about how the invoicing and billing
Sure.
and what you charge for that kind of a process, for the FCE stuff specifically?
So that's going to be flexible, is how I'll put that. And so if that municipality or that employer knows and trusts your product, and they're the ones oftentimes, if they don't have a work comp insurance individual who's setting pricing, et cetera, you can come to terms with whatever you'd like. So again, it gets tricky because with some employers or municipalities, they're self-insured, and in that case, they're the ones who are writing the checks. So you tell them, hey, you love my product, I'm going to bill you $1,000, and they're going to go, great, happy. If you save me $300,000 worth of additional claim damages because your FCE outlines that their effort's submaximal and there's some inconsistent effort that's outlined, they're not gonna care. They're gonna trust you and your product. Now, if that municipality hires or has an insurance company that they're working through, that insurer might push back if you're trying to charge an exorbitant amount beyond what is usual and customary. But you're going to get some wiggle room. Again, I've seen these for $800 to $1,200, depending on the relationship and the value that you bring to that relationship.
So, would you say that one of the differences between working with a network and working with a municipality or employer would be the concept that as a network provider, you're really just providing a commodity service that's going to be price dependent and locale dependent versus an employer where you can, in fact, build a relationship and build a long-term kind of thing? Is that one of the ways that you look at the difference between the two?
Yeah, you summarized. It took you 15 seconds with what I attempted to do in 20 minutes. So yes, I think that's how you could look at that.
Okay. All right. I'm not seeing any questions. Did you want to, is there anything else that you wanted to point out about the municipality or employer thing, or are you ready to go on to another one?
Let's, in the interest of time, let's move on to the next one, just so we'll have time to kind of
Sure.
cycle
Yeah,
through
yeah.
these again from a different perspective at the end.
Yeah, I have a,
Yeah, so this is where I think as a sole, go ahead.
go ahead. Yes, you.
Okay. This is where I think for individuals who are looking to, like, how can I get FCE volume quickly? Because a lot, building a relationship isn't going to happen tomorrow. And when you say, go to that municipality and they say, well, show me your FCE product. Or if a network says, well, we want to bring you in the network, but I need to make sure that your FCE product is good. Sometimes doing that when you don't have a ton of experience can be a little bit of a harder lift. And so I think a huge opportunity for providers that are trying to sort of dip their toe into this, start to figure out the processes, because yes, an FCE might take 3 or 4 hours. Yes, Kevin's software and metrics is going to provide you with an exceptional efficiency piece. But anything that you're doing for the first time is going to take you longer than you would like. And so when someone's telling you you have to have it turned around in 48 hours and you've got a bunch of other patients that you're treating and a family to go home to, some of those other demands might be tough to start with if you're going to go right to networks or you're going to go right to municipalities or local employers. However, physicians often have a need that is, they'll have patients come in. This could be occupational health physicians, sure. These are folks who are managing workers' compensation injuries. Again, in certain states, they can just refer right to you. In other states, it's going to have to go through a network. It's going to have to go through a designated medical provider. There's lots of sort of nuance if it's a workers' compensation injury, but you can do functional testing on individuals who haven't had a workers' compensation claim. And these physicians will often have patients bring in paperwork saying, I'm applying for Social Security benefits, or, I can no longer work because of this nagging injury that I've had. And my short-term or long-term disability carrier needs documentation of these physical limitations that I present with. And physicians aren't going to have the time nor the understanding in most cases to do a functional capacity evaluation or fill that paperwork out in a manner that's consistent with what insurers are going to look for when it comes to Dictionary of Occupational Titles recommendations or Department of Labor recommendations, et cetera. So if you're looking to build on some FCE volume, I think the lowest hanging fruit is physicians. And the easiest way to do this is when you're going to do a marketing launch, or you're popping into a physician, and oftentimes we as therapists know you might get, if you're lucky, 90 seconds of a physician's sort of undivided attention, and as opposed to diving into manual therapy or dry needling or what other intervention that might be new that they've probably heard from 10 other providers, you can explain, well, hey, like, I do functional capacity evaluations, and I can do that for disability candidates. And you'll oftentimes get them stopping in their tracks and saying, tell me more about that, because that's a problem that I have in terms of what do I do with these patients that have this need, and I have nowhere to send them to. And so you can differentiate yourself as a provider by explaining that, hey, if you have that lymphedema person who needs that documentation, that they can't, the job that they have required standing for 8 hours, and they can't stand for more than 90 minutes of a day. Like, there's a clear discrepancy in terms of their ability versus the demands that the job requires. That's useful for the physician. It's useful for the patient. So you can get volume here. Now, the tricky part is it's going to be a cash-based service. Now, that's great because, candidly, you don't have to deal with any of the legwork on the back end. There is no bill review. There's no, I submitted this charge and didn't get I know, Carrie, we were talking, I think it took some time for you guys to get reimbursed that $2,300. There was back and forth and the paperwork wasn't done right. And, that can eat up a lot of your time if there are some, clerical errors. Doing a cash-based service is much, much easier. It's a case of it's fee for service. So, you can set your price. You have to be somewhat cognizant of the fact that often individuals who are applying for disability don't have a lot of additional resources. And I generally advise that if you're going to go that route of taking these patients, that you collect at the time of scheduling, just as sort of a fail-safe that you don't get a cancellation the day before because they can't afford the service. But you can often do this for $500 or $600 as a cash-based service. And while that may not be as enticing as working with the attorney that you can bill, $1,500 or $2,000, it's an easier way to get some reps, and there's no back office legwork that can sometimes eat into that margin.
Just out of curiosity, Chris, so I'm not a huge marketing to physician type of person. And actually, I try to stay away from physicians with my practice, but my practice is primarily working with older adults, and we're really community-based referrals and so forth. So what type of physicians do you recommend people market to, and what, a lot of times people can't even get into physicians without, paying for lunch or, or things like that. And even then they get in and they don't even see the physician. So what would be your recommendations if they would go this route?
Yeah, I think, honestly, it's primary care. And frankly, don't forget that your nurse practitioners and your PAs can also refer for this. And so even if you don't get an opportunity to talk to that physician, if you can talk to their staff, even if you can drop off, you could relatively easily, using some of the different AI models that exist out there nowadays, put together a one-pager on you doing FCEs with your business, logo, brand, here's the services that I offer. If you were to make a play at emphasizing the FCE component, and that you, again, offer a cash-based service to assist for those individuals who are applying for disability, I think you'd make some inroads. But yeah, primary care is usually where we've had success with that in the past. And then again, you could always expand to like your, those specialties that are going to see folks with significant limitations. And that might be your rheumatologist, that might be your neurologists. But again, as a sole provider who's willing to potentially, be able to travel or again, service people in an underserved community, if it's more rural, like you being someone that offers this niche service is a great way to just get the ball rolling and get some reps in.
Awesome. And we have a question in the chat. Yeah. Are you familiar with a company named Excelable? They are looking for PTs in my area to do FCEs.
That is not a company that I'm familiar with. Sorry, I'm no good on that one.
And there are different, I actually honestly don't remember because we've had another company that we do FCEs for that reached out to us. Um, and I will have to look up what their name is, but there are different companies out there that we are finding reaching out to therapists looking to provide this service. Do you have a list of companies, Kevin, at all, or we should start creating a list of these different companies?
Yeah, we have, yeah, like we have, yeah, we've got this, and I've looked up this is another one of they look like another network, Chris, like what you were talking about. So they have a network of 300 clinicians across the country. So they're marketing. So yeah, Kara, there's a lot like not like but we can put together more of a detailed list, and probably easier on a state to state basis, right, Chris? If people want to reach out to us, we could put that information together for them on a state by state basis, as opposed to trying to do a whole country thing. Because that's how we've been doing, especially like these like
Yeah.
mini networks or whatever.
Put in the chat,
Well, and again,
one
a
of
great
the companies
example.
that reached out to us. So I don't know if you guys have heard of Lidos, but you guys can check that out. And Chris, that's the one, another one that we've done FCEs for.
I think I flushed that out after our call, and that was, I think, a disability insurance provider, or at least it appeared they were an insurance organization. And so I would imagine, and again, the tricky part is you run into all these different scenarios where, like, for example, there was a group out of Florida that I used to work with, and they managed like high expense disability policies. And so this was surgeons, neurosurgeons who had hand injuries. And so, these surgeons were on a disability policy that was paying out 70% of their salary. Well, that's a lot of money. And so that insurer is trying to figure out, hey, 10 years after the injury, has this individual's function improved? Can we cut them loose? Could they do something else? And so that's where they'll order an FCE, and in many of those cases, they're trying to, sometimes people forget that FCEs are often sort of in the sphere of litigation and dispute around, someone's functional capacity. And so that surgeon shows up saying, I can't operate and I don't want to go do anything else. Well, it's my job to basically outline, well, what can you do functionally? And just remain objective. And then again, that might have that surgeon may not like me a whole lot once the report gets written, because I might have to outline that actually you can do a lot of functional things. Can you do your job? No, but can you do other jobs? Yes. And so that's where in those instances, you may get paid really, really well, because a lot of providers may say, I don't want to do FCEs in those sort of situations that are going to be more friction filled or, pending litigation, et cetera. So,
Chris, can you speak to, we have two questions. I'll throw them both at you. The first one
yeah.
is, if there's a need rurally, would I be able to rent space for a short term? And the second one is, does the client pay out of pocket for those cash-based FCEs? So I don't know which one you want to deal with first, but those are the two questions, and I can remind you if you forget.
Yeah. Gotcha. So on the rural areas, yes, I think that's where, again, if you want to rent space, I think you can go for it. You don't need a lot of space to do functional capacity evaluations. And the big opportunity there is if you're willing to travel and perform them in some location, and then maybe you're moving to a different part of the state the next month. I mean, the mobility isn't a problem. You are going to probably need to rent some space for FCEs just so that you have a place to perform the test. But I think a physician would appreciate that you're willing to offer that service.
Question, I guess, Chris, was related before. One more question on that, sorry, was the liability. So where you're renting the space from. The follow-up question to that was the liability
Sure.
issue. Have you
I mean, I have to imagine as a sole practitioner that you've got general and professional liability insurance, and that should just make sure that the policy you have covers individuals coming to your place of business, which I imagine would include the space you're renting out.
I think the question is also related to this idea that you could go and rent like a hotel boardroom and do assessments there, which we've seen people do. We've seen people renting out.
Sure.
Anytime you're renting out space, that space rental agreement will typically come with liability insurance as well. We've also seen people
Sure.
renting out space in a clinic because a clinic isn't actually doing the assessment, so you're able to rent out space in a clinic. So those are just some conceptual ideas for people out there.
Hmm.
And then I'll let you go on the full cash-based question is how can we offer cash-based FCEs for clients who are trying to get disability claims if we are in network with clients' insurances? Is the client paying out of pocket was the full question.
Yeah, and so you only need to get burned on this once to learn your lesson. But in short, that, let's say it's Blue Cross Blue Shield or it's United Healthcare will tell you, oh yeah, we're CPT code 97750 is one of the things that we'll reimburse at. Well, they reimburse at like $15 a unit or something that's ridiculously low. And so what I have found over the years is by the time you go through submitting a claim, again, God forbid you have some sort of clerical error and it gets kicked back, you're just not going to get paid well enough for the skill of the service that you're offering to go through someone's insurance. And what I would tell the patient is, listen, they may cover it and that may be great, but generally speaking, we've just had problems. I'll provide you with an invoice or a bill. And if you want to submit it on the back end after you pay me for reimbursement, you can always try to approach it from that perspective. But when it comes to cash-based FCEs, the thing that I would strongly advise you do is collect at the time of scheduling and do not deal with commercial insurance. It'll either not be worth your time if you do get paid, or you might just not get paid.
Do you want to talk about the lawyers? Or do you want to talk about work?
Yeah, so this
or do you want
again,
to talk about the work
another,
conditioning or what we're sort of we're coming we're rounding out of time here a little bit. So
getting close to
See, if you
time
could,
here.
I'd say if you could go to the attorneys, just because we've had private practice owners have good success with that versus, again, like we talked
Yep.
about, less people are going to probably be doing the frequent work, the frequent visit type stuff. So this would be a good one to at least touch on.
Yep. Yeah, so, lawyers are just like physicians in the sense that, it's a single point of contact. There aren't a lot of barriers to you starting to network with these individuals, right? It's a little harder to get a hold of a decision maker at a large network. Sometimes it's a little bit harder to get your foot in the door with a large municipality or a big employer that's going to be able to send you decent volume. Physicians can certainly do that, and then lawyers can certainly do that. Now, again, in preparation for this conversation, I did a little bit of digging into some of the different, rules and regulations of different states. Again, North Dakota was one that I looked into. And again, because you have a monopolistic system where basically the state of North Dakota runs the workers' compensation system, and because they basically have caps on reimbursable rates, they have limitations on how an injured worker can effectively sue an employer. There isn't going to be a lot of lawyer opportunity in North Dakota simply because there's not going to be likely enough money in the personal injury space to make it worth those attorneys' time. And so you're going to need to look into your state because, again, in Tennessee, there's a lot of litigation around workers' compensation claims, and attorneys are part of that. So if there's some dispute on, hey, the physician says that this individual is cleared to go back to prior duty, and the injured worker is saying, no, I can't, I have these physical limitations. Well, an attorney might say, well, let's objectively quantify those limitations by ordering a functional capacity evaluation. So great ways to get to know lawyers is through professional organization. You could offer to speak at a bar meeting on functional capacity evaluations. They're going to want to find somebody who's willing to defend their findings. If you do an FCE for them and are basically going to say, here's the report, don't ask me any follow-up questions, and good luck, they're probably not going to want to use you. They're going to want to find somebody who, if they have questions on the findings, if it goes to a deposition, are you willing to say, here's why I know that the test that I performed is valid and reliable. Here's why I know that this individual does or doesn't have this limitation. You need to be a little more willing to, argue why you're right as a provider. And so sometimes this group, they can send a lot of volume once they know that you're the go-to person who has a good understanding of the testing process and can defend it. They can keep you real busy, and they'll pay you very, very well. And again, the reason being, if they're going to have a settlement that ends up being $600,000 or whatever that number may be, and they're going to get a big cut of that, they're not going to mind paying you $1,500 or $2,000 to do an FCE if they know you're good. If I was building, again, my practice around FCEs or trying to add this as a service line, I start with physicians, get some reps, and as you gain more confidence in the space, you can start looking to work with lawyers, knowing that they're going to certainly pay you more. So hopefully that's I'm trying to be time cognizant here. So.
Yeah, I think that gives us a pretty good idea, and probably even gives us a good finishing point, and we can probably like a next time thing we could talk about the work conditioning and the work hardening as a totally separate piece, because it is sort of its own beast in terms of what we would be looking at doing, and this really kind of rounds out the places that we wanted to talk about. I think for a majority of the people in the audience, was there anything that you wanted to say, Chris? Oh, wait, I do see a question. How do you handle the lawyer, doctor, employer, claims adjuster who say they don't want FCEs because then the person's abilities are in black and white, and then they have to deal with what the capacities actually are? They would rather have the doctor estimate, quote unquote, the abilities.
Yeah, I mean, that's not it's possible that you've seen that in your space or practice. That would certainly not be something that I've encountered with any regularity, and only because you're just setting yourself up for litigation in that situation. It's very easy for an attorney to argue that the physician didn't test any of this and is providing an estimate. And so I think that theory might seem like it would be, let's kick the can and I don't have to worry about this now. But I think at some point there's going to likely need to be some degree of functional testing, particularly if it's going to go to an impairment rating or setting someone up for permanent disability.
I have another good question. Are you getting full payment from the lawyer up front at the time of the FCE, or with a lien that is satisfied once the settlement is finalized? Can you want to speak to that one? That's an excellent question.
Yeah. Yeah, again, lawyers sometimes have a tough time paying their bills, and I say that as the son of a lawyer, so I'm allowed to be a little disparaging. But no, I think that's really going to be a choose your own adventure. Um, I wouldn't do 15 FCEs for them all on a lean, right? But I think if there's an opportunity for you and you wanted to just take a little bit of risk, that could be a way for you to build a referral stream. And again, candidly, a lot of these situations will take 12 to 18 months to play out. There's times even in the commercial insurance space that it might take you 90 days to get paid. And so if you can sprinkle a few in, get the ball rolling, it might be worth it to delay on some reimbursement. But generally speaking, it's always nice to be paid up front because I have run into situations where I haven't gotten paid.
Okay. Um, is therapist who performs the FCE asked to testify after performing it frequently? So it's a frequency question about how often do you, yeah.
If your documentation is buttoned up, so candidly, I've never been asked to be deposed, and it's because my report says what I'd be happy to show up for a deposition to read my report for $300 an hour. But they don't do that because it's all in the report. So it's not a common occurrence. Now, if your documentation's poor or you don't know what you're doing, that's where you can run into some problems. But yeah, not going to be a frequent occurrence.
All right. So, Kara, I see that that's 9 o'clock. Are we want to put a
Can you, can you talk a little bit about the software and how that all works? And then Kevin, can you also just, I know this isn't a quick answer, but how you can use functional testing just in your daily work as a therapist as well
Sure.
versus doing a whole FCE?
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, I'll go to your first question. So, yeah, like part of what we're doing at our company would be to provide the FCE software to sort of do what Chris was just talking about to make sure everything is standardized. So, the software would include all of the testing procedures with instructions on how to perform those things, and it would automate the report writing piece so that you would meet all of the medical legal requirements for your particular process. Relative to the idea of adding, when one of the things we talked about at the live event was just the use of functional progress, Chris, and it kind of goes to what Chris was talking about with the work conditioning conceptual idea, is just adding in functional progress into your regular practice and being able to bill for functional testing as you monitor the person throughout their program. And that's, I think, now Chris and I have talked it through, is probably next time we'll do a little bit more detail with what Chris calls a full blown work conditioning program, and what I was talking about, which is just adding little bits of functional testing into your daily practice and being able to bill for those tests as part of your stuff, and then utilizing actually that information to help build referrals with physicians, or help build referrals because they can see the sort of progress that people are making, and they're seeing parts of your quote unquote full FCE, so they're getting a taste or a flavor for what you would be able to perform on that side there. Yeah, cool.
And just a quick, throw this in here. What's awesome about functional testing as part of just a treatment plan is it's all therapeutic activity as a billable. And again, CPT code, which is a code that reimburses higher than your therapeutic exercise, neuromuscular rehab, or manual therapy. And so even in the normal treatment space, the more that you can incorporate function as part of a program, the better potential for reimbursement.
Awesome. People are starting to get, we're starting to see more audits or I shouldn't say audits, we're starting to see some denials when people are billing 4 units of therapeutic activity. So, we've seen that come through with a few therapists, and then I talked with someone that helps people with denials and audits and so forth, and mentioned that they've been seeing that as well. And that can vary depending on the area of the country and so forth, but something everyone should keep their eye out when it comes to that. Awesome. Any other last minute questions that you guys have? Or as far as next steps, you know, Chris or Kevin, if you guys want to come up with additional thoughts on trainings, we can do, but otherwise, Kevin has a great program with the FCE in the box. We did a program last year that we plan to do again. We have a list of therapists that are going to be going through that program. So if you guys are interested in something like that, just reach out to myself. I'll connect you with Kevin. You know, the best thing is probably just meeting with Kevin for a one-on-one and, you know, getting some of your individual questions answered as well. So.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you.
Otherwise, if you guys don't have any other questions, we will sign off.
Great. Thank you so much, Chris, and thank you for the opportunity again.
Well, thanks for having us.
Kara.
Yes. Thank you, Chris and Kevin. Have a great night. Thank you, everyone that popped on, and we'll talk to you all later. Bye-bye.